Okay. Wow, I am significantly lowering the IQ on stage so far. I think like the last panel was probably the highest amount of brain power I've ever seen on a panel in any Bitcoin conference ever. So that was pretty impressive, and I think the guys did a thorough job of outlining this new proposal in BitVM, which is obviously very connected to what we'll be discussing today. So I'm happy to be joined by Esad from Citria and Sims from Alpen Labs. We'll be discussing the landscape of rollups on Bitcoin today. Obviously, kind of a new narrative that emerged, I guess, in at least this cycle. Something very interesting, something that's been playing out, on other chains for a couple of years already. And so I would just like to start by maybe kind of having a rough definition. I think it seems like we've got a perhaps pretty technical audience, or at least this is usually what attracts people here at the open source stage. But obviously, seeing as the rollups are kind of like a new narrative in Bitcoin, I would like to give you guys an opportunity to give a rough definition of rollups, what rollups looks like from a ZK perspective, and also an optimistic perspective. Obviously, that we can talk about an hour about this definition, but let's try to make that short and succinct. And if you guys agree on the definition, then we can skip to other questions. But I'll let you guys take the floor, yeah.
Yeah, so I can go first maybe. I mean, in my definition, a rollup is a kind of scaling solution that uses the base layer for verification and data availability. You mentioned ZK and optimistic rollups, right? So those are the two popular types of rollups we have at the moment. A ZK rollup would be using ZK proofs for verification on the base layer. An optimistic rollup would ideally have like a dispute and response mechanism on the base layer. So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, to add to that, maybe like a class of scaling solutions that have a batch of transactions that happen off-chain, layer 2, that are settled with a single transaction on Bitcoin. And how that's settled is kind of the different flavors of optimistic versus ZK. And the benefits of this in particular is that one transaction on Bitcoin doesn't require executing, validating individually all of those, transactions that happen off-chain. So the main benefits, that we start seeing there, besides being able to scale, fitting a bunch of transactions into one base layer transaction, is also that, we can build arbitrary smart contract types of transactions in that layer 2, kind of batch that into a single transaction that Bitcoin can reason about, and be able to validate, all the correctness of all of those smart contract transactions on layer 2. So that's the programmability kind of benefit that comes with rollups.
So apart from the scalability, you mentioned like you can enhance the capabilities of the base layer as an L2 as a rollup, right?
Yep, exactly.
A great benefit for Bitcoin.
Awesome. So as I mentioned, this is kind of like a new trend, and I think you guys are, I would say, probably consider yourselves kind of like a new arrival in the Bitcoin builder scene. And I think it'd be interesting to get some color on your journey here as far as arriving into, building stuff on Bitcoin, whether or not you had experience building on perhaps other chains. So where does your interest in ZK, in rollups on Bitcoin specifically comes from? And how have you arrived there?
Yeah, I can start. I think the Alpin team generally, we came at this problem from like very, very different perspectives and timelines. Even like we definitely not new to Bitcoin since 2011, 2013, etc. So a bunch of us approach this kind of from the Bitcoin angle and kind of wanting more privacy, wanting more programmability, wanting better scalability on Bitcoin. And then the ZK angle as well, folks on the team approached it from there, where we saw like the scaling innovations happening with rollups on Ethereum and other ecosystems, But as we sort of reasoned about, well, where do rollups and where does ZK really make sense? We kept coming back to Bitcoin because Bitcoin's sort of designed as a base layer to verify computation. It's not designed to have Turing complete computation and this kind of, as ZK as a technology is really becoming more and more practical over the last couple of years. The realization was that this could enable really interesting things on Bitcoin in a way that's very consistent with Bitcoin's design philosophy. How it's been designed. It's not just a tool to scale Bitcoin, but truly add a lot of these features that we've wanted for a long time.
So it's not a straight story as Alpen Labs, but as the team behind Citria, we used to build on Ethereum and EVM chains. We started our journey with a concept called proof of innocence. At the time, OFAC banned usage of Tornado Cash, a privacy solution on Ethereum, and we were considering we could use the same technology that enables Tornado Cash to actually prove you weren't one of the bad guys that was using Tornado Cash. That's the reason why Tornado Cash got banned in US, because like hackers or like money launderers were using it to lose track of their money. So that's how we got the ZK know-how. We built proof of innocence. The concept got the name from it actually. So and at the time we were also interested in ordinals because once it launched, it attracted our attention immediately because the idea of having NFTs, having big chunks of data inscribed to a blockchain directly was really interesting to us, and we started experimenting with ordinals. We built one of the first Bitcoin and ordinals web extension wallets out there, and while working on ordinals, we noticed there was a trend of using simple Bitcoin essentials to mimic decentralized finance happening on other chains, like BRC20s, now Runes, So we were also into other rollup constructions on Ethereum and other L1s, and we thought DA, data availability, the way ordinals use Bitcoin, could be used for something much bigger like a rollup. So like since last summer, we've been experimenting and coming up with different rollup structures to build, to give Bitcoin programmability basically.
Awesome. I think we had a lot of great people just on the last panel discussing BitVM, and obviously this is an approach that you guys have adopted to basically put up a bridge that will allow people to interact with the rollups that you're building. So we don't have necessarily to get into too much details about BitVM. Well, I guess what I'm curious is, from all that we've heard so far, what are you guys have made in terms of design trade-offs, and what does your implementation look like, and what are you trying to target perhaps in terms of user experience, exit window for withdrawal, and what types of optimizations your own implementation have found so far in building your own design?
So when we first started working on Citrea, there were no BitVM actually. So our first design was a very different bridge and rollup solution. When BitVM 1, the first initial version came out, they were building basically circuits with non-D gates. And this took like 6 months of challenge response games on Bitcoin to settle. Right, so this was not really ideal. Then the idea of creating a RISC-V CPU came along, and it gave us some optimization. And right now with BitVM 2, you can directly create some Bitcoin script and create challenge response games based upon that. We're working on creating a snark verifier in Bitcoin script, but the problem we have right now is it takes 4 gigabytes of 3 gigabytes of data being published on chain. We can create chunks for these script and only make a challenge response on one of the chunks, so that's fine. But we have to split that into 4 megabyte chunks, and that's not really an easy choice. Easy task. And on the design decisions we're making, due to limitations around Bitcoin and BitVM, it looks like the main bridge, the canonical bridge the Rollup will have, it's not going to be very user-friendly, but it's going to be LP-friendly. So someone who wants to provide liquidity on Citrea, they can put up 10 Bitcoin. So let's say we can assume the entrance to deposit limit will be 10 Bitcoin to Citrea on our bridge. And since this whole BitVM process has a lot of pre-signings, a lot of setup to support, it's not going to be really user-friendly, but LP-friendly. But our plan is to have like atomic swap bridges between Bitcoin and Citrea to support smaller amounts and like retail users, and it's going to be way more friendly.
I'd categorize our development so far in kind of maybe two different categories. One on the Rollup side of a layer 2 blockchain that is expressive, has smart contract functionality, is able to give pre-confirmations, so you get fast latency, and has all of these features where you can go and build smart contracts and have that kind of developer experience. The other category is the bridge that connects Bitcoin to that Rollup. And I should add on the Rollup, also, part of that development is a bunch of these transactions happen on this, Rollup. We generate a proof, put that on Bitcoin, and, full nodes of the Rollup are actually just running Bitcoin. They see the proof and they verify it on their smartphones and immediately know kind of what the state of the Rollup is. So all of that technology, more or less, we've built. I think that's like less of the research effort, but a lot more of the engineering effort. And there's existing development efforts that we can use, and it's not really a new, totally new category of new innovation that's required to make that work. The bridge is something that is pretty uniquely new and something that we're looking to evolve state of the art as it exists. When it comes to Bitcoin bridging into rollups. So prior to the BitVM work, the best kind of bridges that were around were multi-sig or federated multi-sig kind of bridges, and maybe a very, very kind of quick explanation for why that's relevant is imagine. I think this audience is already familiar, but like essentially, when you deposit your Bitcoin into some contract, your BTC into some contract on Bitcoin, then you have Bitcoin created on your rollup or your sidechain, etc. What is the trust assumption that you need to make to be able to withdraw that Bitcoin back from this off-chain layer 2 sidechain kind of environment back into the base layer? That trust assumption before was trusting a multi-sig. BitVM sort of carved a path to reducing that to trusting a single honest party out of a federation of, let's say 100 members or 50 members, just trusting that one person is honest to be able to kind of bring that back. The reality was like initially, like theoretically that was possible, but practically, you need like 40 rounds of transactions taking 6 to 9 months to be able to resolve in case of, some kind of challenge that comes in a withdrawal claim. And so just really wasn't practical. And so a lot of our research efforts over the last, 4-6 months have been getting that to be practical. And specifically at this point, what we're targeting is getting a, one event, trusting that a single honest party is honest, only trusting that for the whole system to work, in a permissionless setting as well. So like when a withdrawal claim is made on Bitcoin, we want anyone to be able to challenge that, not just the federation of and people, but you as a user can go and challenge that claim and stop a fraudulent withdrawal from happening and corrupting the bridge. We think that that would be the kind of state of the art as far as what's possible on Bitcoin without any soft fork, without like CAT, without something like that. Yeah.
Cool. So I think like one of the main criticism, or perhaps one of my main criticism around the roll-up landscape has been just observing the evolution of the technology and this specific scaling method on other chains like Ethereum, who really have adopted that as kind of like their main roadmap for scaling. And it seems evident now that they've run into a lot of issues, and namely the biggest one probably is the fragmentation of the ecosystem, where you have, you know, I mean, at this point, I don't even know the number of roll-up projects that are being created on Ethereum almost every other week. And obviously, this creates a scenario where you have different networks of users that are sort of siloed into their own ecosystem. And the unfortunate thing that happens is that this fragments the liquidity. Everyone that, for example, is using a Uniswap type of application or anything like that is only able really to interact with people that are on the same rollup. So there's been a lot of conversation about how, you know, we can kind of like bridge this interoperability gap for the rollup ecosystem. I imagine this is something that you guys think about quite a bit. So I was wondering if you could share some of your thoughts as far as that's concerned.
So in the Ethereum world, we see many different L2s building nearly the same stack of technology. This creates, in my opinion, very bad user experience, because what you get is liquidity on Ethereum is now divided between, like, let's say 100 L2s, and when a user wants to buy something or use some DeFi protocol, either there is not enough liquidity on the rollup there, or it's really hard to get from their rollup to the other without like paying significant fees.
Risky also, right? This is where we're seeing like a lot of bridges emerging and creating a lot of risk for users, right?
Yeah. So like if you want to use the canonical bridge, which is like the most secure you have on the rollup, if it's an optimistic rollup, you're gonna have to wait like 7 days to withdraw. But compared to Bitcoin, Ethereum has this advantage of the community expecting hard forks more frequently. That enables upgrades to the base layer itself that can support this craze of having hundreds of L2s. Like, for example, they had the Dankun upgrade for supporting more data availability, right? And some rollups are also using alternative data availability layers so that they only settle on Ethereum, push their data to some other layer, creating more space on Ethereum itself for other rollups. In the Bitcoin world, we know how hard it is to get some new opcode added, get some new protocol updated. Nobody accepts a hard fork, which is fine, right? So that's why I think Bitcoin itself will not have the same rollup craze that Ethereum has. I think what we should focus on is to get our efforts together, create one good rollup that inherits all the security of Bitcoin, and then we can have that rollup craze on top of the L2 itself. Create different L3s for rollups, maybe gaming, maybe, I don't know, betting. That's something doesn't really require the full Bitcoin security. We can go for L3s.
I don't know if I agree with the roll-up craze not happening on Bitcoin. I mean, I think in some ways it's already happening, where there are a lot of teams building different roll-ups, and today these roll-ups are siloed, and sort of, you know, like where Ethereum is today with roll-ups is fragmented liquidity between these different siloed roll-ups, but also fragmented user experience, super clunky. And so I think that there are solutions for this. I think there are some really interesting directions that we can already see where teams are headed to try to solve that problem and be proactive and actually, you know, introduce that in our designs today. So something like the ag layer, or some kind of aggregate layer that is able to aggregate different chains that sits on Bitcoin could be like a really interesting direction where you get composability between rollups. And I think in particular, one thing that on Bitcoin that I think would be different is on Ethereum, most of the rollups are like EVM rollups. I think that on Bitcoin we'll see a more diverse set of execution environments that these different rollups offer. Initially, a lot of us, including Alpin, we are going for EVM because the EVM as a technology stack, not necessarily Ethereum as a consensus protocol, but EVM as a technology stack, we think just has a lot of network effects and distribution that would be great to tap into for smart contract developers. That's what our developers want. But I see some teams already talking about SVM. I would love to see simplicity as a rollup as well on Bitcoin. I think that's a really interesting execution environment. And so we'll see different types of trade-offs being made, and maybe some will be Validium type of using data availability elsewhere, just focused on maximally scaling throughput. And we need to think about how to make sure these aren't siloed. And I think with something like an ag layer, which is an aggregate layer that sits to aggregate transactions of these different rollups via ZK proofs, we could actually get unified user experience and be able to get really atomic composability and between all these rollups, which would be a very exciting kind of endgame map, I think.
So the reason I said Bitcoin won't have that rollup craze is that for a rollup you will need the data beyond Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's data availability is really secure, but it's not big enough. If we're going to compromise on security, then we can go for Validium, sure. Then we will have that rollup craze with many different VMs and many different setups. I agree on that, but it's going to require compromising on the security.
So are we expecting Alpin and Citria merger? So I wanted to ask because this is the open source stage, obviously, and I think specifically in the context of zero-knowledge technology, it's something that's specifically important because we're talking about cryptographic primitives that are kind of novel. I think there's solid research around all of that stuff as far as security is concerned, but obviously I think it's kind of like an ongoing process. I know that someone at John Hopkins, I think just a couple of weeks back, kind of released some research paper around not necessarily pointing out specific attacks. I think those attacks were kind of well known, but perhaps kind of presenting the landscape of how secure really those cryptographic, specifically Starks and things like that are. Maybe you want to share your thoughts about how you guys go about, open sourcing your work, open sourcing your research process, and how important that is for both of your company.
So, for any software that handles money, hacks are a big problem. You want to have a lot of people review your code and find out potential vulnerabilities. So in that sense, open source is a great tool to prevent these kind of attacks and hacks. And also, of course, as a user, you want to know if my money is secure, so you want to review the code maybe. Especially in the ZK rollup world, though, since you have a single binary that decides on the final state, and this single binary is run by a single node, maybe like a single prover scenario, then you have absolute control over the state, right? You want to be sure 100% that this thing is working as expected, right? So you want to have both audits, and also you want to make it open source so that lots of people can contribute and also review the work you're doing.
Yeah, I think in the blockchain space broadly, I don't think enough teams appreciate the fact that we're building not just any kind of software, but software that is dealing with real people's money. And I think the standard that we need to set in terms of production software here is totally different than most of the software that like people typically work on. And I think open source is a critical component of that in terms of getting the type of auditability that the code actually needs. In addition to that, I think all teams should, before a mainnet launch where you're really dealing with real people's money, have formal analyses of these cryptographic systems that you're using, and have audit of the code as well. So both on the protocol side and having a formal kind of research analysis, as well as code audits. I think that should just be the kind of minimum bar. But in addition to that, open sourcing is super important for auditability.
Open source is so popular in the blockchain space. I think sometimes we are taking it for granted. Like, look at your bank, right? They're all closed source. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So I'm grateful for all the open source contributors. We probably have a bunch of them here. So thank you, guys.
Cheers to that. I believe that's all the time that we had. So I appreciate you guys coming up on stage with me. Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks.